Hello and welcome. In today's video, I'm going to share with you 10 easy carnivore tames. So let's get into it. In at number 10 is the bulb dog, and this was first introduced on Arboration, and what a creature this is. And some may say it's not a carnivore, as you do tame it with mushrooms kind of to start off with, but its favourite food is mutton. The bulb dog is also a very useful carnivore as well, especially with its light pet ability, making Reapers and Nameless significantly debuffed against you, and I'm pretty sure Nameless won't even come out of the ground when in the presence of a lit up bulb dog. On Operation, definitely a worthy tame and a pretty easy one, and on other maps as well, it is just a really cute shoulder pet to have in your roster. In at number 9 is the Baryonyx. Now overall, the Baryonyx is not the easiest of carnivores to tame. There are definitely some much easier carnivores to tame on this list, but the Baryonyx is just so useful, and it isn't necessarily a difficult tame, which is why it is on this list, for obvious reasons. And especially if you have the next gun at your disposal, the Baryonyx will be one of the easiest tames in the game. But if you don't, you can just make a simple 2x2 trap with foundations and door frames. It will be extremely easy, and it will work every single time with no fail. The only fails you can really have is the creatures around you killing you and kind of destroying your tame in that sense. But once tamed, you have yourself an absolute beast of a caving arc dino. This creature is absolutely insane for caving, and yes, many people nowadays do use the Shadow Mane for caves, as it is again a small creature which can fit into most caves. The Baryonyx is still always my go-to, and unlike the Shadow Mane, it has that secret spin ability there, which was somewhat hidden by the subscribe button, but you will see it later on in this b-roll. And essentially what it does is it will stun enemies, and it can stun enemies up to the size of a megalodon. Sadly, it doesn't work on land, which would be great, but it is still great in the water, and it makes it really good for those underwater caves. And yes, the underwater caves with the artifacts and not the loot, but I'm sure most of you will know that by now. Next up, we have the Angler, and what a creature this is, and also what a forgotten creature the Angler is. And the Angler is definitely a creature which you should tame at some point, especially in the early to mid game stages of the Ark game. Obviously not too early, as you do not want to be venturing into the ocean, I think, until at least you're in the high 20s or low 30s in terms of level. But what is the Angler used for, apart from just being a reasonable creature for traveling around Ark's oceans? Well, this thing is by far the best ocean creature out there for gathering silica pearls. There just isn't any other creature which can match its gathering ability. Obviously, there are going to be better ocean creatures out there, but silica pearls are an extremely useful resource, and it can do black pearls as well if black pearls do actually spawn ambiently on that map, which is a good thing as well, as again, silica pearls and black pearls are an extremely useful resource which later in the game you will need a lot of. So if you start gathering them early on, you'll definitely be thankful. Next, we have the Argentavis, and this is by far a kind of bread and butter Ark creature. You need this creature in Ark, and there's pretty much no questions asked about this creature. This is a creature that you just have to have, unless you're obviously on Gen 1 or Arboration, when flyers are not allowed. But on most maps, excluding the two which I just mentioned, the RG is always a tame which every Ark player should have. And the main reason for that is for its metal gathering abilities. Yes, it can't gather metal in itself, but it is still an insane resource of a creature which can be used to get to and from the mountains, and you can use a different creature like an Anki to actually gather up that metal. And this will have weight reduction on things like metal, crystal, and obsidian, so you can easily transport it from A to B with no weight problems at all. And also, the RG can pick up a wealth of creatures as well, making it pretty good for taming other creatures too, especially the Anki again, as you can pick up an Anki on the RG and then you can simply drop it into a trap. But if you do not have the RG available to you, the Anki is still a very easy tame, as you can just lead it into a little trap. The same with a Baryonyx, and the Anki is pretty slow, so you shouldn't have too many issues. Also, its saddle works as a portable smithy, and if it eats a dead body, it has absolutely insane regen. Now, the Beelzebufo. This is a creature which, again, is definitely really underrated among many people, and it is a creature which I really see so much potential in, and it is a creature which I use a lot for cementing paste gathering. It is an absolutely insane gatherer of cementing paste, and unlike things like beaver dams, it is a lot more reliable, as if you didn't know already, Ark is an extremely buggy game, which hopefully will be fixed for ASA, but we never know, and sometimes beaver dams just will not spawn on the map, or will you just have to wait for them to spawn as the beavers haven't made them yet, or there just isn't any beaver dams on the map for whatever reason. There are just so many things which can go wrong with beaver dams on Ark maps, and the Beelzebufo is a sure way to get that cementing paste every single time, especially on the island, as you have the insect cave, and if you have a good Beelzebufo that has enough health to withstand the absolute insanity of insects which are in the insect cave, then you'll have yourself a really good time on this thing. It is a very easy tame, which can just be tamed with the net gun again, or with a simple trap, and it may be able to be bowlered, but I'm not quite sure about it. Either way, if you can, tame yourself one of these frogs, you will not regret it. In at number 5 is the Crystal Wyvern, and this creature is more for the mid-game Ark players, as sadly it is unlocked behind a level wall. You have to unlock this thing over level 65, which in my opinion is a bit of a shame, but it is definitely an OP creature, and if you do a quick, cheeky, sneaky note run, you can actually get this thing pretty quickly, and it isn't too bad. And its taming method is probably one of the easiest on the list, but it is just a little bit further back, as that 65 level requirement is a bit steep for quite a lot of new Ark players. But the way how you tame it is a very simple passive tame using a type of crystal that you only find on Crystal Isles, and then you just feed it that crystal, and there's a spot where you can sit on its back and you can just simply press the button every time it asks for it, and then in a matter of minutes, or maybe 10 to 20 minutes, you'll have yourself a fully tamed Crystal Wyvern. And if you go for the Blood Crystal Wyvern, you have yourself an even better creature, as its blood sucking ability, I'm pretty sure, regens you and also just deals so much damage to the enemy. Definitely really good wyverns to have, and compared to the traditional wyvern, they are significantly easier to tame, and they have all the wyvern benefits. Again, they have the insane speed, they can pick up all the same creatures. Obviously, their turning circle isn't great, but they're wyverns, and also their damage and health is up there as well. Definitely creatures that if you're over that level 65 boundary, you should tame. Now, the Maywing. This creature was originally introduced on Gen 2, and many people still think that this is not a carnivore, but in fact it is, and if you have tamed a Maywing, you will know it's a carnivore, but I'm pretty sure it's an omnivore as well, so you can get away with berries, which is kind of where the mix-up of this list comes. Yes, it does still eat meat, which is why I'm including this thing on the list, and most things will say that this is a carnivore type creature, and you probably want to feed it meat anyway, as later on in these stages of the Ark game, meat is much easier to come by than any berry can be. And in terms of its abilities, this is by far the best travel mount you will find out there. There is just nothing that can match the absolute speed of a Maywing, and the efficiency too. They really are insane travel mounts. And also on top of that, they are great for raising and breeding your creatures up too, as they act as a portable feeding trough. Definitely one to be extremely useful, especially if you're more into breeding. And you can even steal enemy creatures that are being raised if you're into PvP and you're raiding someone's base, when the servers are obviously back up. And also you can even gather berries with these things with the berry flop ability. Definitely a very good creature. In at number 3 is the Carno. Now, I can't forget the Carnotaurus, and in my opinion, this is one of the best carnivores out there, which is why it is so high on the list. It is just so easy and simple to tame. Again, with that very simple trap. You can just shoot it from afar, and then it will run into the trap, and then you just have to knock it out, and it's so easy, as long as there aren't other hostile creatures in the area, which sometimes it can definitely be the case, and sometimes it can go wrong. But if you do the right preparation, this will be a piece of cake to tame, and you will have no issues with it at all. and I urge you to tame one of these things. They are really, really good. Yes, they won't stack up to the damage of an Aloe or a health of the Rex, but they have a mobility that the Rex can't have, and they also have the ease of taming, which the Aloe doesn't really have as much, as the Aloe does come in packs, and the Aloe is significantly faster than the Carno, but the Carno still has a very decent amount of speed and a decent amount of stamina to go along with it. And like the Aloe, it also has the bleed ability, as if you use its second attack, which is a headbutt, it will inflict the bleed to your creature which you are actually attacking, which again is an insanely useful ability for a carnivore to have, and the Rex and the Spino don't even have that ability. The Carno is definitely one to be tamed. It isn't difficult. I know it looks daunting if you have just started Arc, but trust me, in your first at least couple of days of Arc playing, if you can get up to the saddle level requirement, you'll tame yourself a really, really nice Carno. In at number 2 is the Reaper. Now many of you right now may think I am completely crazy. How is the Reaper an easy tame? It is one of Arc's late game tames, and it is one of the most difficult tames in Arc. So why is it in an easy carnivores list? And I'm not just going to say because it's an insane carnivore, as that still would not be an excuse for this thing being on the list. Well, the reason why is on Genesis Part 2, the Reaper is a really, really easy tame. But sadly, on all of those other maps that the Reaper spawns, you'll not have as good of a time, which is why I'm not putting it in number 1, as the number 1 spot is reserved for a much more accessible creature that is actually still significantly easier to tame than the Reaper. Essentially, if you want to check out how to tame it on Gen 2, check Raj Clark's guide. You can just search up Raj Clark Reaper Easy Taming Gen 2, and it will come up right there, and then you can look how to tame one. If you don't have Gen 2, sadly, the Reaper is not going to be an easy tame for you. But this taming method is just such a good discovery that I couldn't discount it, and I have to have it on this list. And once tamed, obviously, the Reaper is an absolute beast of the carnivore, and it is one of the best creatures which you can get in Arc. Overall, just completely. The Reaper is insane with a wealth of attacks and a beastly amount of damage, and a really, really nice health stats to go along with it too. But before we get into number 1, I have a quick honourable mention, which is the Pteranodon. This is by far the easiest fly to tame, with its saddle unlocked at level 38. You really can't miss it. It's just a simple boulder and club tame. Definitely worth it. And finally, in at number 1 is the Deinonychus. Now, in terms of the taming method for this thing, you can basically not get simpler. Essentially, you go to the Chalk Cliffs on Valguero, which is a free DLC, by the way, so every Arc player, apart from, I think, Switch, and definitely mobile players, will have access to this thing as long as you obviously have Arc and you're not one of those people that just watch Arc top 10s because they're thinking of buying Arc. If you're one of those people, that is totally fine. In terms of the Deinonychus's abilities once tamed though, this thing has a wealth of them. Mainly its bleed ability, where it can latch onto larger creatures and just inflict all of that bleed damage. Definitely one which is extremely useful, especially because it can be used in bosses extremely effectively, which I'm pretty sure to this day no other carnivore can actually achieve. But also, the Deinonychus is an absolutely insane pack mount as well, just for general travel around the Valguero map, and one which is 100% worth taming. You just need the egg, and then you'll just need some torches, which are unlocked at an extremely low level. And again, talking about their travel, these things can zip across the map, and they can climb up any wall or vertical surface. These things can literally just parkour across any Arc map with absolute ease, and deal all the damage that you'll be required to do, which is an absolutely insane thing for a carnivore of this ease to tame to actually have. Definitely one 100% worth the tame. The top 10 best designed Arc tames. In at number 10 is the Baryonyx, and this creature is obviously very widely renowned and recognized for its insane caving abilities, but also its character is an extremely iconic one too, with its elongated tail and very sharp teeth, and also its tendency to just eat fish meat. This is a carnivore pretty much like no other, especially considering the time frame where this thing came out, and that was far before creatures like the Shadowmane were introduced, so it really was the first creature there in terms of great caving tames, and it really was a big influence back in the day, and it still is my favourite caving creature to this day, and it really has to be talked about in terms of well-designed tames. especially in terms of its body and movement as well. It's got a really slim figure, it moves really fast, and its model is heavily detailed as well, and obviously, like I said, a very iconic one. It is also packed with a wealth of special abilities, namely obviously its spin attack in the water. When you press right click, it will stun creatures up to the size of a megalodon. And on top of all of that, it does great damage too, and that is something you always want on any carnivore. In at number 9 is the Carno. And again, this is another one of those old influential arc tames, and it really is one of design. And if you've never seen one up close before, they will definitely make you laugh when you actually look up to it. Its arms are so comedically tiny, you cannot help but laugh at it. But it is also, on top of its comedic value, a very great creature with great mobility and great damage, and since the TLC, it has a bleed ability attack as well, which is something you always want on any kind of carnivore, and you do really need it at some point on any kind of carnivore to make it that best carnivore of which you can think of. And yes, the Aloe may be a bit of an upgrade, having a better weight stat and dealing more damage and just being a bigger and more powerful creature, but I always have love for the Carno, and especially considering how early on you can unlock its saddle and how ridiculously easy this thing is to tame, although on ASA that really doesn't matter anymore, as the baby creatures just make taming carnivores like this extremely easy anyway. But still, in ASE, the Carno is significantly easier to tame than the Aloe, and in my opinion, it is just my preferred creature due to its smaller size. It is just a more efficiently designed creature in my opinion, and I really like it for that, and I really like it for its character, its model design, and just its general charm on top of that as well. I really can't see myself in Ark without one of these things, and as always, call your Carnos Carny Dave. Next up, we have the Basilo, and this really is the epitome of underwater creature ocean design. This is pretty much the best ocean creature which you can find, especially for doing caves on the island, which is obviously very relevant at the moment, as the island is the only real non-janky map which you can get on ASA. Obviously, Svartalfheim is available as well, but I'm pretty sure that solution is a little bit more janky, and some stuff has to be done. It doesn't just come when you obviously install it, and you can't just install it like you would install a DLC Ark map on ASE. They are, it's on a different modding platform. It's on something different. You can probably look up how to do it, but to this day I'm still not really sure. The only real downside with the Basilo is the fact that it has a depth limit, but the fact that it can withstand electric eels and jellyfish and those kind of creatures, this really is a creature which you should tame at some point, albeit its passive tame can be a little bit of an annoying one, but it is definitely one worth taming, as it is a really cool tame. In at number 7 is the Reaper, and the Reaper really can't be forgotten about in terms of great creature design. Obviously, it isn't the most inventive thing out there, pretty much just being an exact copy from the film Alien, but it still does have a slightly different twist on the xenomorph character that we all know and love. And it definitely doesn't mean it is a bad creature at all, and it is an extremely powerful one, just like you'd expect if you've watched Alien or Aliens. For that matter, they're the only real ones worth watching. Don't watch any more than that. Alien and Aliens is all you need in terms of xenomorph films. But obviously, the Reaper has immense power. And also, Alien style, these things will burst out of your stomach, but they won't kill you. But the baby may actually kill you after it if you don't have the adequate amount of Reaper pheromones to essentially act yourself as being the mother of that child. But it will burst out of you xenomorph style, like it does in the film Alien. And on top of that as well, while it is still inside of you, getting loads of XP will warrant an 100% effectiveness, which is a really cool thing, which yes, the Rhinogonatha has a similar taming method for. The Reaper method is still a lot cooler to me. Now, we obviously can't discount the Argy for its design as well. This is probably one of the most well-rounded Ark creatures out there for so many things, and it is the epitome of metal farming on Ark. No creature can compete with the level of which you unlock this, and also the amount of skill and abilities and mobility this creature has. Albeit it isn't the fastest flyer, it will still pack a punch in terms of damage, and it has stamina to fly over the long run, and it also has weight to carry any resource of which you wish, especially things like metal, crystal, and obsidian, which have insane weight reduction. And it can also pick up a wealth of creatures as well, which is just something which I really like to see, and it is great to see how many creatures this thing can pick up, especially considering its size. And obviously when paired with the Anki, you have yourself an ultimate pairing of flyer to land creature, as the Anki can gather tons and tons of metal for you, and then you can simply carry that back on the RG back to your base, and you'll have yourself an absolute metal load. And also on top of that, it does have a portable smithy as a saddle, so if any of your metal weapons break, always make sure to have a couple of spare metal ingots in the RG saddle, and you can simply fix up a pick or a hatchet or a piece of flak armor if you've just done a cave run. And if you eat a dead corpse, if you're low on health, they have really great regen. Definitely something to try out. In at number 5 is the Maywing, and this creature is obviously one which is highly respected and is a very new creature, full of a wealth of abilities. And in terms of its design, it is pretty much the best travel mount which you can find out there. Obviously it doesn't compare to the RG in terms of utility, but in terms of speed and getting around the place, the Maywing will do significantly better. But this thing obviously isn't meant to carry around metal. It is meant to carry around babies, as its saddle has 4 points where you can hold any baby creature. Doesn't matter what they are, we don't need to care about size or scale, they'll simply scale down into the saddle. Not really sure how that works, but you know, it is Ark, I guess, and we'll just go along with it. And obviously the Maywing also acts as a portable feeding trough as well, which obviously does help baby growth too. And yes, a feeding trough isn't the most expensive thing. It is so much more convenient to have this thing out, as you don't have to use up loads and loads of meat, and you can easily move that feeding trough around if you have multiple bases. Not to mention that if you belly flop on bushes as well, you can gather berries with it too. Now, the Deinonychus really can't be forgotten. This creature is one of immense skill and immense power, and is probably the best boss creature to date. And in terms of its model design, it is definitely one of intricacy and great detail. This thing has an insane amount of model detail, and with all of its feathers, it really is a nice model. And on top of that, it can grapple onto large creatures and literally just suck the blood, or tear the blood, you should say, right out of them. And this works on bosses as well, which no other Ark creature, to my knowledge, can do. Obviously making this pretty much the best boss creature, as the bleed ability is absolutely OP. And also on top of that, they have great mobility too, and their transport is definitely one of the highest out of any of the carnivores in Ark. Not to mention that they don't even take full damage as well, which albeit isn't a big issue, as you can always just dismount just before you hit the ground to negate all full damage, but it is still really nice, as you can be much more fluid in your motions, and it is so much more satisfying to use this thing. Not to also mention that it does have the pack buff too, making this even better for bosses, as obviously you're not just going to be bringing one. And although not the most elegantly, it can also grapple over many walls and vertical surfaces, which is an extremely useful ability for any Ark creature to have. In at number 3 is the Shadowmane, and this creature is again one of the newer ones, but it really has to be mentioned really high on the list for its design. The Shadowmane is just there every time when it turns to good design in terms of Ark, and this really was a great decision from Wildcard to include this thing in the game, as it is now one of the most popular Ark teams out there by far, and at the moment the Shadowmane is being widely used by everyone. but mainly people are just going to tame the highest level male and highest level female and then just breed them, as their taming method is an absolute pain, and I have done it a couple of times and I really don't want to do it again, but I will obviously at some point when I play through Gen 2 on ASA, whenever that is. I know the release dates have kind of been announced, but it may be a bit rushed or it will be delayed, who knows at this point with Wildcard. But also, some people don't know about this, the Shadowmane is a great swimmer too, but it kind of makes sense considering its codename is literally Lionfish Lion. In at number 2 is the Desmodus Draculae, and this thing is obviously again one of the newer Arc tames, but it is just one of such great design that it seriously can't be discounted on this list, especially considering its insane design and also its insane ergonomics. This thing is one of the best controlling flyers out there, obviously having the glide ability shared with creatures like the Snow Owl and the Griffin, but yet somehow seems to be even smoother than the two of them, while dealing insane amounts of damage as well, being great for farming blood bags, which no other Arc creature can do, being able to grapple onto walls and vertical surfaces, even ceilings like a Tapijara, and also making Sanguine Elixir, which is an absolute cheat for tames. Not to also mention it can go invisible too, although only at night time, and that won't work on Extinction, or at least I didn't manage to get that to work, so maybe don't use these things on Extinction. And finally, in at number 1 is the Velonosaur. And this may be a bit controversial for many of you, but I really am fond of this creature's design. And in terms of creature design, model design, and abilities, I think this is the coolest out there. Obviously, literally being a living, moving turret, which no other Arc creature still to this day has done. And obviously Extinction came out like 2018, 2019, not quite sure when it was, but it has either way been a long while, and I'm actually seriously questioning why Wildcard hasn't actually revisited this thing, as it is literally my favourite tame to use at the moment, especially considering I am replaying through Extinction. It is just so fast, easy to control, and it deals immense amounts of damage with its turret ability. Albeit you wouldn't use it this close to a creature, you would just use its general hack and slash ability, but just for demonstration, I was just showing it to you there. And also its animation kind of does look really creepy as well. But in terms of the way that this thing attacks, no other Arc creature can compare to this thing in terms of design and also just in general how creative this creature is, which is why I put it in at number 1.
Now, of course, we must shout out our Patreons, Ekaterina Pechkova and Karina Thorne, who are our paid Patreon members at the moment. Thank you for all your support. I really appreciate everyone on this list. Everyone else is, of course, free members. Thanks for the support, though.